So now we're going to go from the global scene to the local climate action scene. And I'm really pleased to be joined by two true leaders for climate action in our local area. First, I'd like to introduce Julia Zeitlin. Julia is an 18-year-old climate activist and leader in the Bay Area. She is a recent graduate of Castilleja High School and incoming first year at Stanford University. Julia is a former president of the Palo Alto Youth Council and chair of Congresswoman Eshoo's 2023 Student Advisory Board. Julia is a current intern in the Palo Alto Public Works Department in the Office of Sustainability. She is a member of Palo Alto's Climate Adaptation and Protection Working Group. Julia is the co-founder and executive director of the Palo Alto Student Climate Coalition. And I'd also like to mention that Julia is a returning guest here on Other Voices, having been on the TV version 5 years ago when at 13 years old, she founded a local chapter of the Sunrise Movement. Welcome back, Julia. It's good to see you again.
Thank you, Paul.
And congratulations on getting into Stanford.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
And also joining us is Avro Shah. Avro is a 15-year-old climate activist and environmental advocate. He's a rising sophomore at Palo Alto High School and has been involved in environmental and climate advocacy since third grade. He has since founded climate action clubs, organized several events, and collaborated with various organizations and campaigns on local, national, and international scales. Avro is the co-lead of the outreach committee of the Palo Alto Student Climate Coalition, and he's also a plaintiff in the federal climate and children's lawsuit known as Genesis B versus the Environmental Protection Agency. And Avro recently spoke at the Commonwealth Club about this lawsuit, and we're going to talk to him about that. Welcome to Other Voices, Avro. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Paul. It's good to be here.
So let me get a quick reaction to the film from both of you. And what I'm more interested in is what inspires you, what motivates you to keep going. Are you imbued with the radical optimism that one of the speakers referred to? And then we'll get into some of the specific projects, really neat projects that you're both involved in. Julia, your first reactions and what motivates you?
Thank you, Paul. Well, I think it was really incredibly inspiring to see the young activists from all across the world facing the impacts of climate change here and now, especially in such disproportionate ways. A lot of times when we have conversations about the climate crisis, even today, it's discussions of when climate change arrives, when these disasters strike. But no, it's really these impacts are here and now. Unfortunately, I don't think I share the same radical optimism that the other activists showed in the film have. I think right now, a lot of my peers, my fellow classmates, are experiencing a lot of apathy. I think given the political climate right now, there's not a lot of hope among my generation, or at least in this current environment. But I think that is one of the keys that's motivated me. When I was here on Other Voices 5 years ago, there was this immense energy to organize for the climate movement, and it had gained a lot of traction. And I think, the political moment has shifted, and I think we're going to need to resort to even more, I think, aggressive strategies to make our voices heard and to mobilize people, because I think there isn't the same sort of collective energy that there was and excitement about taking action on climate. I think right now we've seen a lack of action, a lack of urgency.
Maintaining momentum is a problem for any movement. I have enough years behind me that I can tell you there are definite ups and downs. I think that's a very interesting observation. Avro, do you have some reflections and thoughts on what motivates you and keeps you going these days?
Sure. So I completely agree with Julia that something that I like to call climate apathy has really gripped the lives and um, mindset of many young people. It has shifted from a tone of we're going to do this, we're going to power through this, to a tone of I don't think that I can make a difference, or I think it's too late. And something that I find truly appalling is that it is the big fossil fuel, big oil industries that are sowing the seeds of doubt into everyday individuals through their campaigns and their ads to give you that apathy and to discourage you from taking action because they know how powerful our voices can be when we raise them, and they know the potential our voices have in terms of making momentum and passing policies that help safeguard our planet and safeguard our futures.
Do you
So,
think,
sorry.
go ahead, please. Please continue. Go on.
Yeah, so I think that it's vital that we take more robust action. And it's my understanding that people take action in many different ways. And as someone who doesn't personally go out and get arrested, I see where people come from in the different ways that they take action. And I think that it's great to encourage people to take action on all fronts so that we make true climate progress.
Thank you. An excellent observation. Well, let's talk about some of the specific actions that the two of you are involved in. There's some overlap, but Julia, let me start with you. You're helping currently to form a new organization in Palo Alto called the Youth Climate Advisory Board. Tell us about that. What's that all about?
Yes, that's correct. Well, so with our work with the Palo Alto Student Climate Coalition, we've built a coalition of students from high schools across the city of Palo Alto, educating them on how to engage in local direct advocacy with their local leaders. And we've equipped them with the tools to hold the city accountable for its climate goals and carbon emissions reductions targets. And so throughout these past few years, we've built our relationships with our local city council members, with local city staff and government. And through our advocacy, we've built these really powerful relationships that have allowed us in this past year to propose the creation of a more formal board, the Youth Climate Advisory Board, that would give students, youth in the community a protected body to have a voice on the city's climate initiatives. And so through these discussions this past year, we have made this official. The Youth Climate Advisory Board, the application to join the inaugural board is going out on Monday. And we've worked together to design a program that brings young people into the municipal climate policy process and gives them a chance to inform local policy, contribute to Palo Alto's environmental initiatives, and really see the power that local climate action can have. I know I said I don't have radical optimism at this point, but something that has kept me motivated is to see that I personally, as an individual, can make a tangible impact on climate by helping our city reduce our emissions. 70% of global greenhouse gas emissions come from cities. And so even if we're not seeing the rapid scale change that we need to see at a national or global level, impact at the local level is truly impactful.
And how do you think Palo Alto is doing in meeting their own goals, and are the goals sufficient?
I definitely think the city has sufficient goals. We've set a carbon neutrality by 2030 goal, which is 15 years ahead of California's state requirements. We also have a main goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions 80% from 1990 levels by 2030. And this is pretty bold. We reduced a lot of our emissions in 2013 by transitioning to practically carbon neutral electricity. All our electricity comes from renewable or clean sources, I should say. And so, I think we've made a lot of progress, and specifically in 2013, there was a steep drop compared to 1990. But as you can see, if you look at the charts, these past few years, discounting the pandemic, we haven't seen the dramatic reductions we need to get to our 80% reductions goal. And so I think it's going to take a huge community effort to kind of come together and collectively acknowledge that we need to kind of transform our city, transform the way we live. And maybe that entails making some sacrifices. Maybe that entails changing your mindset or your perspective. But I think there's an opportunity for us to still meet these goals, but something needs to change in the way our leaders are talking about climate. They need to go beyond just kind of agreeing that sustainability is a priority and to really make a statement and show that sustainability is the future of our city. And that's the future of our city is really dependent on what they do here and now.
Yeah, I suspect that some of the dismotivation that both you and Avro have talked about maybe comes from the fact that after the Paris Accords and all these international meetings, that actually not a whole lot has been done to actually impact, or not enough is being done fast enough. Do you think that adds to this apathy that people just aren't seeing enough action yet? Avro, thoughts on that?
Definitely. I think, especially for climate change, our work against it, a movement that has been going on since the 70s, just because we've been here for so long and we've been fighting for the same cause, people begin to feel hopeless because they think, you've been at it for so long and we've seen less progress than what we need to be seeing. I think people start to, lose a sense of hope, especially now as effects of climate change become more and more universal, and we start to see it in our own backyards. And that's not to discredit the severity of climate impact destruction across different communities and situations, but rather to highlight how environmental destruction has become such a universal part of our lives. And people begin to feel hopeless because they think, now this is impacting me, and I don't think that there can be anything that's done about it.
Interesting. Take a minute to tell us quickly, because I want to bring our audience into this conversation. You're a plaintiff in this lawsuit, which is like others in other states, as I understand it, called Genesis B versus the Environmental Protection Agency. And it's young people suing the federal government for lack of action, the lack of action that we're talking about. Is that right? And what's the status of this lawsuit? Just give us the thumbnail sketch of that.
Yes, so we are 18 plaintiffs, all 18 or younger now. When we filed it back in December of 2023, we were all minors under the age of 18. And we are suing the Environmental Protection Agency for allowing really disastrous and deadly pollution levels, especially as they adopt discount rates that value the lives of children like me to be less than the lives of adults today. So we filed this lawsuit back in December of 2023, and in response, the government motioned to dismiss, saying that your harms are caused by climate change, but even if we were to take the steps, redressability to mitigate those harms could not happen because your harms are in the past. So on April 29th of 2024, we all came down to LA for a hearing on the dismissal. And unfortunately, right before we walked into the courtroom, the judge had released something called a tentative, saying that he was leaning towards the side of the government to dismiss the case, but he would do it with leave to amend, meaning that we could amend our complaint to show that there is redressability. And something that I thought that was really notable that Julia Olson, our lead attorney, said in that courtroom was that the harms that we are experiencing because of climate change are not just in the past. They're ongoing and they will continue to get worse if we don't take action against climate change. So that's just something that really stood out to me. Unfortunately, following a similar case, Juliana versus the United States, being forcibly dismissed due to a writ of mandamus, the judge dismissed our case with leave to amend, asking us to distinguish it from the Juliana case and also to show how we have redressability. So we have filed a amended complaint, and I believe August 20th, we have another hearing date, but the government is still working on their response to that amended complaint.
Okay, thank you. It's a very good summary. Have your lawyers mentioned to you at all yet if they think the lawsuit will be impacted by this recent Supreme Court decision? It undermines how these government agencies go about writing and implementing legislations. The recent Supreme Court ruling that undermined what's known as the Chevron standard, or has that not come up in conversation yet?
That hasn't come up in conversation, but I have been following the news of the Chevron doctrine. And from my understanding of it, and of course, this is not coming from a legal standpoint, I know that what our case would be able to do is essentially give the Environmental Protection Agency, well, it would be mandated by the court to first off stop using the discounting rates when they factor into the pollution they allow, which would dramatically cut the pollution allowed. And this would be mandated by the judiciary. So this would essentially permit the EPA to take the steps necessary to mitigate the harms that are perpetuated against youth like me.
Yeah, very good point. It would be coming from the courts, which the Supreme Court now says is how they want to do it. Let's bring our audience into this conversation. This is a conversation for all activists. If you have a question, you want to ask it live, click on the raise hand icon down at the bottom of your screen. And when you get called on, you'll get a little pop-up window to tell you to unmute your microphone, and you can ask your questions or comments. We're open to comments here as well, your thoughts on the film and things like that. If you want to just type out a question, click on the Q&A icon in there and type in a question, and I'll read the good ones that come out. So we have one hand up already. Jim Mitulski. So let's call on him. And
there we go, I think.
There we go. Okay, Jim, what's your question?
My name's Jim Mitulski, and I'm the pastor of the Congregational Church in Belmont. And I wonder if our speakers tonight have thoughts about how faith communities can play a role on a micro level and right now on these issues.
Thank you. Excellent question. Who wants to take that one? Julia?
Sure. Thank you for your question. I think the faith community, as it has with many other movements throughout history, could have a big role in raising the community awareness of climate issues and bringing the community together to take steps to address what we can at the local level. I know some local churches, I believe, in the city of Palo Alto have taken steps to electrify their places of worship, their buildings. So kind of being a model for the community, taking steps to transition the building itself, the physical space, away from fossil fuels and towards electric appliances and infrastructure. I know that has been a great way to bring the community together to discuss, the power of these steps. And then also, personally, I think, just having more conversations about the climate crisis, bringing people together, preferably of all ages, to talk about, the reality of what we're going through. I think it could, I think, religion has the potential to, provide people with hope and motivation and guidance towards a shared goal. And so I see a lot of potential there.
Julia, or Avro, is there any kind of organized outreach to the faith communities, churches and synagogues and mosques, to convert to green energy? Because these are some of the largest buildings in any town, and they're supported by a lot of people. Is there any kind of organized outreach to organized religion? Julia, do you know?
I'm not familiar, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's been organizing on this, but I wouldn't be the best to answer that, fortunately.
Okay, well, maybe that's something that the Youth Advisory Commission can do when you get it up and running, is spearhead outreach to the churches. Okay, Debbie Mytels has her hand up, and we will bring her on in just a second. Okay, Debbie.
Hi, Paul. It's really great to hear Julia and Avro's talk too, and then the film. Just to answer your last question, there is quite a number of organized religious efforts to work on faith-based responses. And as Julia pointed out, a good number of the congregations in Palo Alto are working on electrifying their heating systems, their water heating, all these kinds of things. Those that have the resources to do it are doing that. And City of Palo Alto Utilities actually has 3 people working on this as a staff right now as well. So good things are going on. And I do chair a group called Peninsula Interfaith Climate Action. And we have about 24 congregations on our email list, and just had our monthly meeting today. And I'd be happy to meet offline with Pastor Mikulski from the community church in Belmont if he's interested, because we're always looking to talk with more people. And there are several other regional and interfaith groups. There's California and National Interfaith Power and Light. I just love that name. I think it's great. And then there's a number of Jewish congregations that are part of a group called Adamah, which means the land, and they're working on that. And so there is a good number of people who are working on it. And I think we need to work on more efforts as well. So as a part of following our values of trying to think about how we can live together as a whole people on this planet in brotherhood and fellowship with each other. So just to let you all know about that. Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much, Debbie. That's a very thorough update. Okay, I see David Page has his hand up, so let's bring him on. David, welcome. David?
And hi,
Okay.
hear me now?
Yeah, now we hear you.
Very good. First, I want to say thank you, Paul, and to Avrov and Julia for all the great work you're doing. I know sometimes it's not always socially the easiest thing to do, but thank you, for all your efforts. When you were talking about electrifying some of the local churches, I was thinking about Greta and her initial conversations with her parents about decarbonizing their lifestyle. And I was curious about Avrov and Julia in terms of what type of discussions they've had with their parents and what type of impact that has had in their own life.
Nice question. Very good. Julia, why don't you go first?
Great. Yes. One of the major steps that our family has taken collectively, because we have lots of conversations about political issues and climate specifically. I've definitely made that a big conversation in the home, but we've all moved towards the plant-based diet. We're all vegan. I personally think on an individual level, that's one of the biggest steps you can take. I know, unfortunately, it's a little bit controversial, and there are barriers to this, of course. But we've I've been vegan for 7 years now, and I think it has a huge impact on the environment. So that's kind of one big step we've taken. We've also replaced our gas stove with an electric stove. My mom is actually a professionally trained chef, and I know, she fully endorses the electric stove. I know there's some difficulties with that. And we have a plan that once our appliances or our heating system or water heater breaks, we're going to transition towards the electric heat pump alternatives. And so we're, right now thinking about how to prepare for that when our appliances do break. So thinking about what rebates we can access and try to make that transition as smooth as possible.
You're going to want to tune into other voices coming up later this summer when we're going to talk about all the rebates and the help that's out there now to put them all together. Avro, what's your family support situation like? Have you had to convince your parents to go green, or what's it like in the Shah residence?
Yeah, so my family a few years ago decided to get solar panels, thinking of it not necessarily as a environmental investment, but rather a financial investment. Just thinking that it would pay off to get solar panels because you're getting that nice rebate on your electricity bills. So we
Yeah.
would have our electricity bills would be zero for a long time, and that was really great. Just to know that we're helping the city and its grid by giving energy, and in return, we're getting something in exchange for that. I've been trying to convince my family to look at the heat pump water heater program, and we had the city guys come in and take measurements to see if it would work in our house. And I think the agreement is also, when it fails, we'll replace it. Unfortunately, our heat pump, our gas heater, it failed back in, I think, 2021, just a couple years before the city rolled out its new program.
Uh-huh.
So we'll have to wait a little bit. But hopefully the rebates will still be around, and I think my parents will take the right steps to electrify and decarbonize our home.
All right, terrific. I know that the Palo Alto Student Climate Coalition has a project coming up later this summer, and it's something that people could plug into directly. So let's talk about that a little bit in our remaining minutes here. You're involved in something that the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration is organizing around the country called an Urban Heat Island Mapping Campaign. Julia, what's this all about? Heat mapping.
Exactly, that's correct. So the Palo Alto Student Climate Coalition, we're partnering with Actera, the city of Palo Alto, the city of East Palo Alto, the mayor of Menlo Park, Bellhaven Action, and Youth Community Service to map the distribution of heat across our three cities, Palo Alto, East Palo Alto, and Menlo Park. So basically on one of the hottest days of the summer, in late August, early September.
You might have already missed the hottest day of the summer.
I'm really hoping we haven't, which is selfish, but I kind of want, save it up for this one day. I'm hoping it's cool for the rest. But on one of the hottest days, we'll be recruiting volunteers from across the bay to drive along pre-planned routes throughout these three cities with heat sensors attached to their cars. Heat sensors supplied by a company called Kappa Strategies. And we'll have volunteers go out and collect data 3 different times of day. And with this day of data collection, we'll be able to understand which communities, which populations are most at risk during days of extreme heat. We're expecting to see areas with limited green space, with low tree canopy coverage, communities that have been historically redlined, with high levels of impervious surfaces, concrete roads, to experience heat in a different way during heat waves. And so through this work, we're really hoping to be able to understand how to support those communities. And through these partnerships that we have with these cities, we'll be able to implement localized cooling solutions to help the residents that are most at risk. And so there's really exciting potential to be a part of one of these campaigns among others happening across the world right now, to be prepared against the threat that is extreme heat, which will only be getting worse as the years go by.
Thank you. And Avro, are you working on this project as well, or what are you concentrating on these days?
Yeah, so in terms of heat mapping, I've been working with other members of the outreach committee on the Palo Alto Student Climate Coalition. We've been tabling every Sunday at the farmers market, and it's a really, really great way to engage just everyday people who are walking by. And it actually, some people were like, screw it, I'll sign up for this. So we're hoping to see them on heat mapping on our day, which slips my mind right now, but I believe it's somewhere near the end of August or early September. And I'm really excited about this campaign because I think that it shows something really great, and it sends a really good message to the community, which is, this is the foreseeable future if we don't take the correct steps. But, we can make the changes to mitigate those impacts of extreme heat, and we can also take the correct steps. So while it may be a little bit scary, I think it's also a message of hope to know that, if we take the correct steps, we can avoid constant heat every single day of the summer. In terms of some of the other projects that I've been working on, this past year, I led a vermicomposting workshop initiative. And what we did was we got a grant and we set up these vermicomposting, which is a fancy word for composting that involves worms, these bins, and donated them to various groups, such as the Gun Garden Club. Next year, we're planning on going to the elementary schools. We have a couple lined up so far that we're going to do, and we have this really great presentation that we've developed about composting and its relationship to the environment, trying to just teach kids about sustainability and simple steps that they can take, because we've noticed that there's a huge lack of education about that in our schools. In addition, I'm also looking into a new project to further electrification in PAUSD, our school district. We passed a really great proposal to electrify our school bus fleet this, I believe, 2 years ago. And so far, we have 2 electric school buses. I'm going to look into, expanding that to become our whole fleet, and also to expand the total electrification of our school district. Because so far, we've only electrified 20%.
A worthy goal indeed. Well, I don't see any more questions out there, so I think I will say thank you to both of you. We've been talking with Julia Zeitlin and Avra Shah of the Palo Alto Student Climate Coalition. Any closing thoughts on the role of youth going forward? Avro?
Well, thank you for so much for having us. It's really great to have this opportunity to share what we've been working on with the public and talk about some potential steps that people can take, whether that's signing up for our heat mapping campaign or just getting involved in the climate movement in general. I think it's really key to know that we have the steps out there, we know what to do. The scientists have laid out the plans and the solutions. All that's left is to implement them. We have the goals, we have everything, but the steps just need to be taken.
Thank you. Julia, closing thoughts?
Yes, thank you, Paul, so much for having us. And lastly, I'd just say, I think we're at a really critical moment politically. I think especially those who saw the most recent presidential debate. And I think, this is a time to come together and take the action that we can in our local communities. Thank you, Paul.
Okay, well, thank you again, Julia and Avro. Many thanks to David Simon, who's been working feverishly behind the scenes to keep this running nicely. And thanks to all of you for joining us here on Other Voices. We'll be back later in the month. I don't know what we're going to be talking about, but there's plenty out there to talk about. Thank you so much, and so long.